Why should you read the poetry of Raymond Carver? That's a good question. One, if you like poetry, he's very good. Definitely a good guy to go with. Two, if you already like Raymond Carver and haven't read his poetry, and you're interested, what better reason? And three, even if you're unfamiliar with Carver as a writer overall, his poetry is still a good intro to his work. And if you like it, you'll definitely like his short fiction. I will say this though, the poetry of Raymond Carver is quite a bit different from his fiction in a lot of ways, but in all other ways, it is very much the same. His poetry is a little more diverse in subject matter and contains a lot more references to literature, literary figures, and stories of these writers. Are a little more absurdist, a little more dreamlike than most of his fiction. However, a lot of his poems are also about ordinary people, written from an ordinary perspective, and a lot of them are on ordinary subject matter. For example, he wrote a poem called "The Car," and it's just describing all these different physical attributes of the car, as well as kind of the emotional connection the narrator has to the car. It's very interesting. He wrote another poem that's basically in the form of a letter by Franz Kafka. He wrote some about typical things. He wrote about fishing and birds and forests and things, and also just about relationships. I mean, the relationships are a huge staple of his writing, and anyone familiar with Carver's work know that that's a big subject and a theme that he would return to in the course of his entire career, and a subject that deeply fascinated him due to his own interesting and often troubled relationships that he had. I really like this poem. It's called "The Lightning Speed of the Past," and I'm just going to read it because it's very short. It starts off with a quote from André Malraux, and it says, "The corpse fosters anxiety in men who believe in the Last Judgment and those who don't." And the poem itself goes, "He buried his wife who died in misery. In misery he took to his porch where he watched the sunset and the moonrise. The days seemed to pass, only to return again, like a dream in which one thinks, I've already dreamt that. Nothing, having arrived, will stay. With his knife he cut the skin from an apple. The white pulp body of the apple darkened and turned brown, then black before his eyes. The worn-out face of death, the lightning speed of the past." I don't know, this stuff is very interesting. It's just as deep as his fiction, a little more stylized. It's not as minimalist as his prose writing. His prose writing feels very reminiscent of Hemingway, in that he was very bare bones in how he described things, and his language being very minimal and very basically like the most utmost spare you can imagine a paragraph being is his fiction. Whereas his poetry, while it's still stark, definitely has more flourishes to it. There's a little more flesh on the bones of the structure of these poems. I have here a collected edition of all of his poetry entitled "All of Us." It encompasses basically every volume of poetry Carver published, and collects basically every poem that he had published in his lifetime. And he published several books of poetry, including "A New Path to the Waterfall," "Ultramarine," "Where Water Comes Together with Other Water," "At Night the Salmon Move," "Winter Insomnia," and "Near Klamath." He also published books of fiction, as I mentioned, new and collected fiction. And also there was some posthumous collections of prose and poetry that were originally not published in book form before. He also published a book called "Fires," which encompasses poetry and prose that he wrote, which this book collects in its entirety. But I don't know. The thing is, you kind of already have to like poetry to really like Carver's poetry. By that I mean you kind of have to just like poetry in general, no matter who it's by, because poetry is its own medium. It's its own written form that contains its own idiosyncrasies that fiction often doesn't have, and it is written in a more free-form emotional canvas than fiction usually offers. Not to say that fiction can't be poetic in its prose, and even poetry may have reminiscent qualities of fiction, but poetry is its own thing. And I don't know. I feel like people who usually don't like poetry in general generally don't like any poet, no matter who it is. Whether it's Carver, Robert Graves, Robert Frost, Carl Sandburg, Walt Whitman, Emily Dickinson, E. Cummings, anyone. Typically, if you don't like poetry, you don't like those guys. Or if you only really like certain types of poetry, most people don't tend to gravitate to other poetry. Someone, for example, who likes Shakespeare's sonnets probably won't be thrilled with Walt Whitman's long poems. Or even like Edgar Allan Poe's longer poems about death and mortality, like The Raven. Although, if they like sonnets in general, they would like the sonnets that Shakespeare wrote, as well as the sonnets Poe wrote, I'm sure, most likely. And probably just about anyone else who, worked within the sonnet frame, like Edna St. Vincent Millay. But Or those who may just only like longer poems may not like shorter ones. Some people who like really long flowing narrative poems, like, say, the ones that Herman Melville wrote, may not like shorter forms of poetry such as the haiku, the sonnet, the villanelle, etc. So it really comes down to preference. But in my opinion, if you do like poetry, and even if you have or haven't heard of Carver, I do recommend his poetry. And the reason I think you should read it is because I think there's a lot to offer here. I think there's a lot of not only depth but empathy in his writing. Not only in his fiction but his poetry, for certain. And not only in his poetry but his fiction. Twist it around. There's a lot to be said, and it's interesting hearing his thoughts on. Did you hear that? Sorry, something made a noise. It's interesting hearing his thoughts on a wide range of things, including life, relationships, etc. And the minutiae of the everyday is a big topic, both in his fiction and his poetry. I just, I don't know. It's interesting. That's the main thing about it, is it's interesting. What makes it interesting is the numerous topics that he wrote about, the slight subtlety and difference in its style from his fiction. Reading Carver's poetry is almost like reading a different side of him, reading a different kind of side that he kept hidden from those who read his fiction. It seems more of an expressive, more open personality that comes through in his verses than does the very spare, usually more aggressive style of his fiction. But in his little scenes of the everyday are really nice too. Like, he wrote a poem called Autumn, which I will again read for you, and it goes like this. This yard full of the landlord's used cars does not intrude. The landlord himself does not intrude. He hunches all day over a swage, or else is enveloped in the blue flame of the arc welding device. He takes note of me, though, often stopping work to grin and nod at me through the window. He even apologizes for parking his logging gear in my living room. But we remain friends. Slowly the days thin, and we move together towards spring, towards high water, the jack salmon, the sea-run cutthroat. That's it. That's interesting. It's so short, but it captures kind of this whole relationship the two characters have, the narrator and the landlord, and kind of captures the minutiae of like their daily lives around this place. And the little details, like how the landlord leaves his logging stuff just parked in his living room. or his used cars parked on the front lawn. And also just the passing of the seasons is a nice touch. And here another poem here called Winter Insomnia, which I also really like, and it's actually one of my favorite Carver poems. And it goes something like this. The mind can't sleep, can only lie awake and gorge, listening to the snow gather as for some final assault. It wishes Chekhov were here to minister something. 3 drops of valerian, a glass of rose water, anything, it wouldn't matter. The mind would like to get out of there, onto the snow. It would like to run with a pack of shaggy animals, all teeth, under the moon, across the snow, leaving no prints or spore, nothing behind. The mind is sick tonight. And obviously, me reading these to you, I feel like it probably gives you an idea of whether or not you're going to like these pieces. Some of them are longer. There's a poem here called Egress, that's quite long. For Carver, it's like a page and a half. For him, that's quite a bit for a poem. He usually wrote very short pieces. I like this one, called The Young Fire Eaters of Mexico City. And it goes something like this. They fill their mouths with alcohol and blow it over a lighted candle at traffic signs. Any place, really, where cars line up and the drivers are angry and frustrated and looking for distraction. There you'll find the young fire eaters, doing what they do for a few pesos, if they're lucky. But in a year their lips are scorched and their throats raw. They have no voice within a year. They can't talk or cry out, these silent children who hunt through the streets with a candle and a beer can filled with alcohol. They are called milusos, which translates into 1,000 uses. Oh, I'm going to read the car, by the way. I just saw it on here and I really like it. And it again describes kind of the relationship the narrator has with the car, as well as the emotional resonance the car has to the meaning of this, as well as just being kind of a long laundry list of certain attributes the car itself has. But anyways, here's the car. The car with the cracked windshield. The car that threw a rod. The car without brakes. The car with the faulty U-joint. The car with a hole in its radiator. The car I picked peaches for. The car with the cracked block. The car with no reverse gear. The car I traded for a bicycle. The car with steering problems. The car with generator trouble. The car with no back seat. The car with the torn front seat. The car that burned oil. The car that rotten hoses. The car that left the restaurant without paying. The car with bald tires. The car with no heater or defroster. The car with its front end out of alignment. The car the child threw up in. The car I threw up in. The car with the broken water pump. The car whose timing gear is shot. The car with the blown head gasket. The car I left on the side of the road. The car that leaked carbon monoxide. The car with the sticky carburetor. The car that hit the dog and kept going. The car with a hole in its muffler. The car with no muffler. The car my daughter wrecked. The car with the twice rebuilt engine. The car with corroded battery cables. The car bought with a bad check. Car of my sleepless nights. The car with a stuck thermostat. The car whose engine caught fire. The car with no headlights. The car with a broken fan belt. The car with wipers that wouldn't work. The car I gave away. The car with transmission trouble. The car I washed my hands of. The car I struck with a hammer. The car with payments that couldn't be met. The repossessed car. The car whose clutch pin broke. The car waiting on the back lot. Car of my dreams. My car. I really feel that one. Because I can actually really relate to that one. How do I say it? I just got my first car. And it's not perfect. It's not a new car. It's not a Lamborghini or a Ferrari or even a Mustang. It's not fancy. It's nothing special. In fact, it's old. It's a 10-year-old car. It has its problems. The passenger window doesn't roll down. The brakes are a little faulty. Transmission's a little faulty. I hit a curb and knocked some of the bottom plastic of the alignment from the front and had to tie it back to the bumper. But it's my car. And it means a lot to me. And I feel just as much of an attachment to my car as the narrator of Carver's poem about his car. Maybe even Carver himself talking about his car. Like with all writing, whether it's poetry, prose, novels, essays, plays, song lyrics, whatever, what you get out of it is often what you bring to it. And what you bring to it is your own experiences. Your own bad times, your own good times, your own comedy, your own drama, your own pain, your own past experiences, your own hopes, your own dreams, your own enthusiasms, your own turn-offs, your own bad relationships, your own interesting or not so interesting history, your own exes, your own family members, your own siblings, your own parents, your own grandparents. All these things are what we bring to all art. And the question remains, how much do you bring to it? Anyone interested in reading Carver's poetry, or any poetry, or a novel, or anything else, has to ask themselves, what am I bringing to it? You know, what can I get out of this, and what can I bring to it? Art is not experienced or meant to be experienced in a vacuum, nor is art created in a vacuum for a vacuum. Art is created by the artist to express his or her emotions, as well as his or her way of seeing things, communicating his or her own truth to an audience. And that audience is us. So whether it's Carver writing all of these poems and publishing them over the years for complete strangers that he'll never know or meet, people like me who were born after he died, it wouldn't discover his writing until I was in my early 20s. What do I bring from it? What do I bring to it? What is it about his writing that moves me? What is it about his writing that makes him one of my favorite writers? One of my favorite poets, and not only one of my favorite poets, but also a poet who has hugely influenced my own writing as a poet. And the answer is, again, what we bring to it. I connect with Carver. Not entirely. I don't share his history. I don't live my life the exact way he lived his. I certainly don't have a lot of the experiences he had in his life. But the truths he communicated connect with my own. The experiences that I had reflect back to me the experiences he had, and show this empathetic connection of, I understand where he's coming from. I get what moved him to say that because I have felt that too. And that's what we all look for in art, is universal truths. We look for not only universal truths, but in artist's particular universal truth as expressed as they know how. Every artist working in any field has always expressed what they thought of as the truth. And any artist worth his weight in salt is going to communicate that truth to an audience. Whether it was Picasso, Goya, Monet, Franz Klein, anyone, they were all expressing their truth. They were all bringing what they saw of the world and what the world gave them to an audience. That said, Carver did the same, not only through fiction and poetry, but even a few non-fiction pieces. And these poems, reading them, even if I haven't had the exact experience, still speak to me. The reason you should read Raymond Carver's poetry is the truth in the poems. The reason you should read poetry in general is the truth in the poems. The reason you should read fiction is the truth inside the fiction. Stephen King once wrote, "Fiction is the truth inside the lie." And I actually think that is the greatest way that's ever been expressed about any art. Because even if a story isn't true in its details as well, in that it never actually happened in someone's real life, it is no less true than if it had. Because the experiences still ring true. They still sound true to us because they are. So, again, whether you're reading poetry by Carver or whoever, I mean, whether it's Robert Graves or Carl Sandburg or Ray Bradbury or Edgar Allan Poe or whoever, anyone who wrote poetry, the reason you're reading it is for the truth. And I didn't mean to get so heavy, or I didn't mean to like stand on a soapbox and philosophize, but that ultimately is why I feel like we willingly take in art. To quote the great YouTube reviewer Bennett White, art shouldn't be something that just happens to you. And I feel that's very true. Another quote that summarizes beautifully, how I see it as well. So, if these poems sound like something you would like, if they sound like they jive with how you see things, or have struck a chord in you, or have reminded you of things, or have made you think of things, or even daydream about things, or sound even remotely interesting because they reflect what you're into or how you see things, then they're for you. And not all art is for everyone. I totally get that too. Like I said, art is an expression of how someone sees their truth in the world and is an expression of themselves. But that doesn't mean we have to like or enjoy all art. For instance, I don't like Bret Easton Ellis's novels, but that doesn't mean I don't think he has the right to write them, or the right for them to be published or enjoyed by people who do. I don't particularly enjoy a lot of music performers. But again, that doesn't mean I don't feel they have the right to express themselves, find an audience who connect with them, and, have those fans. In fact, I think it's totally great when someone, like that has their fans. I think that's wonderful. That, their work is connected with so many people, and so many people have that music to help them, to guide them, to get them through hard times, to celebrate the good times, as with all music. Or, for example, I don't like Robert Frost. I don't think he was what I would consider a good poet. Nonetheless, the people who do find, comfort or inspiration or beauty in Frost's writing have a right to. They deserve it just as much as people who find beauty, comfort, strength, inspiration, or happiness through E.E. Cummings' poetry, or Anne Sexton's poetry, or Sylvia Plath's, or anyone else. That's fine. So, in summation, I'm sorry I'm being so long-winded here. Why you should read Raymond Carver's poetry? Because of what you can get out of it, or what you may find. Or you may find that you like it, or you may find that you don't. But either way, as a fan of it, I hope that you guys will at least try it. Experience it, see what you think for yourselves. And if it's not your bag, cool. If it is, then I'm just glad I was able to kind of share it with somebody. Anyways, I'm very sorry for lecturing and being very long-winded and giving a TED talk on the hows and whys of art, but I feel like when someone asks me, not that anyone ever has, but if someone were to ask me, well, why should I read Raymond Carver? Or why should I read Peter Straub? Or why should I read Brian Evenson? Or why should I read Sylvia Plath? Or why should I read John D. MacDonald? Or why should I read Stephen King? Or anyone else? My answer is the same. Because of what you get out of it. Because what those guys say are true. Because those guys are all great at their craft, all do it for the love of what they do. And a real artist does it for the love, for the expression, for the passion, for the work, for showing the truth. Hacks only do it for money, or to sell out, or to gain attention, or notoriety, or whatever. And even art I don't regard as technically good, I still find merit in it. For example, I don't personally think R.L. Stine was a good writer, but I personally like R.L. Stine. And when I say he's a good not a good writer, I can't speak. See, I'm no lecturer. In fact, I feel like I'm just blowing hot air. But the reason I like R.L. Stine is because while he may not be able to technically write something that feels authentic, like feels like real dialogue, or real characters, or real character motivation, or stories that feel like these are happening to real people, they're still fun. There's still an ironic enjoyment for the faultiness of it. There's still genuine pleasure that comes to me out of seeing something that is so badly done. That's the reason we like movies that are bad. There's fun in it. There's kind of an ironic enjoyment to be had by seeing the failings of someone trying to do something. Tell a story, or basically not tell a story and just make a cheap buck. Depending on what it is. I'm not saying R.L. Stine's out to just get money. I really don't think so. I think he actually genuinely loves doing it. He's published a ton of books. He's been around for a very long time, and he still continues to write every day. And I love it. I'm so glad R.L. Stine is still writing. I'm so glad he has this back catalog of several books to read. And I thoroughly love them. And I reread them all the time. I don't think R.L. Stine is a hack. I don't think he's a fraud or a sellout or anything like that. I think he genuinely does it. Do I think he's good at it? No, but I still find his stuff fun to read. And to me, that's a legitimate reason just as much as reading something good. A novelist who I think actually does write very great work is Stephen King. And even though I read R.L. Stine for different reasons than I read Stephen King, those both reasons are valid, and I don't think they're great. And I don't fault anyone for reading something for an ironic reason. To read it because it's so bad it's good, or see the technical failings of it, or just to read it because they like silly trash. That's totally fine. I do the same thing. I'd be a hypocrite if I said, "Oh, you're reading that," while still reading R.L. Stine. I'm actually a huge advocate and defender of so bad it's good art. Whether it be movies, TV shows, novels, anything. I think that stuff is just as valuable and relevant as the genuinely great works of art that will stand the test of time. I mean, whether it's, because not everything can be those great works that stand the test of time. Not everything can be, Mozart's symphonies, or Dante's Inferno, or hell, even Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, which, while I find the writing of those to be terrible, the story and ideas within are timeless. And not everything has to be. Not every movie has to be Citizen Kane. Not every novel has to be The Grapes of Wrath. Not every song has to be... what's a classic song? Hey Jude. Not every song has to be Hey Jude. Not every novel has to be Grapes of Wrath, like I said. Some things can just be ironically fun. And that's okay. So, returning to my original thesis question. Why should you read Raymond Carver's poetry? Because, again, they're fun. They're good. They're interesting. They're deep. There's a lot to be said. It's interesting to see his thoughts on many different things. And even if you don't find any of those things in there, maybe you'd like him for just maybe how silly you think they are, or maybe you'd find them pretentious and have a laugh at that. Either way, his work would still be being enjoyed by an audience, and that's what counts. So go ahead and like whatever you like. Go ahead and like, what your friends don't, what your parents don't, what your relatives don't, what your siblings don't, whatever. Go ahead and like things that critics don't, or go ahead and dislike the things that critics like. What matters is you like it, and that's all that matters. If it works for you, then don't let anyone tell you that it shouldn't. Don't let anyone discourage you from liking something. Whether it be something that is technically great, like the Harry Potter novels, or something that falls flat on its face but still is fun, like the Goosebumps books. Or movies, go ahead and like The Room. It's great. It's an entertainingly bad movie. Don't let your friends knock you from liking it just because they only watch art house films directed by David Lynch. It's two different things, two different worlds, and that's okay. So again, sorry, I'm lecturing and rambling and whining and preaching, and I don't mean to. I really don't mean to. I actually did not even intend for this video to go this direction. But when I ask myself, why should whoever's watching this read Raymond Carver, I have to give the same reason I'd give anyone in person. The same reason that what I feel is true. The same things I just said to you guys. Because of what you get out of it. Because it's art. And art is about just as much what we bring to it as what it brings to us. So I hope you liked the poems I did read from here. Again, I'm so sorry for that long diatribe about art and the nature of art and why we like it, why we don't like it, what works, what doesn't. Sorry for that. But I did hope you enjoyed the poems I read from here. I think they're really good. And I just, I'm going to read one or two more just because I like them. And if you like them, it gives you a little more. And if you don't, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. For those who probably don't, you probably already shut this video off. But for those still watching, even after I rambled and gave a whole spiel about everything, for one, I appreciate it, and two, thanks for sticking with me. So let me read you one or two more before I go. This one's called Waiting. Left off the highway and down the hill. At the bottom hang another left. Keep bearing left. The road will make a Y. Left again. There's a creek on the left. Keep going. Just before the road ends, there will be another road. Take it, and no other. Otherwise your life will be ruined forever. There's a log house with a shake roof on the left. It's not that house, it's the next house, just over a rise. The house where the trees are laden with fruit, where flocks for Cynthia and marigold grow. It's the house where the woman stands in the doorway wearing the sun in her hair. The one who's been waiting all this time. The woman who loves you. The one who can say, "What's kept you?" I really like that one too. It's a very interesting concept of comparing paths down the road to paths that we make in real life. I know Robert Frost did it previously with The Road Not Taken, but this one, I don't know, this one works for me more. This one feels a little more true to me, a little more relatable, I feel. Alright, one more, and I'll stop bothering you guys. And you've already been very patient with me if you've made it this far. I really appreciate it. Okay, last one I'm going to read is called Memory. And it's one of two poems called Memory. This is the first. And as it's written is Memory, bracket, 1, bracket. So it goes like this. Cutting the stems from a quart basket of strawberries, the first this spring, looking forward to how I would eat them tonight when I was alone for a treat, Tess being away. I remembered I forgot to pass along a message to her when we talked. Somebody whose name I forgot called to say Susan Powell's grandmother had died suddenly. went on working with the strawberries, but remember too driving back from the store. A little girl in roller skates being pulled along the road by this big friendly looking dog. I waved to her. She waved back, and called out sharply to her dog who kept trying to nose around in the sweet ditch grass. It's nearly dark outside now. Strawberries are chilling. A little later on, when I eat them, I'll be reminded again, in no particular order, of Tess, the little girl, a dog, roller skates, memory, death, etc. Anyways, thanks for listening to me ramble on about art, about the nature of art, why we like it, whatever, poetry, names of people who wrote poetry, fiction, movies, music, etc., 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 and Raymond Carver. Thanks for watching this video. If you like it, I actually do a lot of book-related videos, so please subscribe! Somebody heard me say it, so if you like it, I do other book-related videos where I do reviews or talk about books or talk about writers. I've even started recently doing book videos where I read my own writing, because that's what I do, and I'm trying to publish my own stuff. So, if you like that, you'll like this channel, and I hope you give a subscription. And even a like wouldn't hurt. So, anyways, thanks for listening. If you like what I've read, you can buy all of this on Amazon. It's easily available. Or you can even buy the collected individual volumes of poetry Carver published, like Ultramarine, Where Water Meets the Other Water, etc. Till then, I will see you guys in the next one, and I appreciate you watching. Later.